we need to talk about Deadpool and Wolverine. Now, this video is going to be kind of critical of this movie, but even if you liked it, I want you to stick around, okay? Because I didn't go into this movie wanting to hate it. I was actually really hoping it would be good because I'm a fan of the first two movies. So don't start with the whole, oh, you just hate fun. Not every movie has to be an Oscar-worthy masterpiece. Let's just slow down. All right, I'll have you know that I grew up with these MCU movies and kind of adored them. I want you to take a look at this little nerd dressed up in the theater in his full Star-Lord costume going to see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Because that kid is me. I mean, this is what I posted on my story before going into the theater to see Endgame. And this is what I posted after. I was throwing in hashtag don't spoil the Endgame like I was an official Marvel Studios account. All this to say, I didn't go into this movie looking to hate it. I have become more critical over time about the MCU films, but I still believe that many of them hold up even as I've gotten older and been exposed to more films. I've enjoyed both Deadpool movies a fair amount, especially Deadpool 2, even with its flaws. You care about this cast of lovable misfits that are all uniquely characterized. There's emotional stakes because even in this heightened parody world of Deadpool, these characters feel tangible and you care about what happens to them. None of this is present with Deadpool and Wolverine though. The cast of misfits is tossed to the side for our shinier, newer action figures that we all recognize. The character of Vanessa especially seems to just be completely discarded pretty awfully in my opinion. In the first Deadpool movie, she is her own three-dimensional character that serves as a comedic foil to Deadpool. In the second one, she's killed in order to send Deadpool on his journey. And then she comes back at the end, of course. And in this most recent one, she's hardly even there. In each film, she becomes less and less of a character, and more of just a plot device to send Deadpool out on a quest. All she seems to do now is just wait for Deadpool to arrive to give him the motivation to get the movie going. I mean, this is a character who, in the comics, has their own superpowers and is an important part of the X-Force. And look, maybe you'll say, well, the movie's called Deadpool and Wolverine, not Deadpool and Vanessa. Okay, sure. Let's take a look at how Wolverine is portrayed throughout this film. Wolverine is not a character in this movie. I mean, really think about it. You don't actually have a reason to care for this guy. He just seems like a copy-paste version of the Wolverine from the movie Logan, just a bit younger. Side note, I watched Logan a couple days after watching Deadpool and Wolverine, and I forgot how good that movie was. If you haven't seen it in a while, I definitely recommend you watch it. But anyway, I'm going to describe Wolverine's arc in this movie. He gets plucked out of his universe, jaded and feeling survivor's guilt for not being there to prevent the mutants from being slaughtered. He reluctantly joins Deadpool under the guise that he can revert the damage in his universe after helping Deadpool. He realizes that this is most likely a lie, gets angry, and then Laura comes along and tells him the plot of Logan. Not even 2 minutes later, he's just okay to go along with this entire plan that he just rebuked. Oh yeah, Laura, by the way, X-23, she's in this. I've got more on that later. Wolverine doesn't even know who this girl is. Why should this have any effect on him at all? He just flips a switch and becomes fine with everything? It makes no sense. And if you point this out to people online, they'll just say something like, well, I didn't go into a Deadpool movie for a good plot. I just want to have fun. Well, I'm sorry. I just didn't have that much fun. A movie can be fun and still have a good plot. In fact, I like a lot of movies with plots that are probably a little subpar. It doesn't even have to have a good plot, just something that feels a little bit more earned. Things happen in this movie just because they have to happen, not because there's any actual driving force. I mean, it relies on your knowledge of previous X-Men films, and Logan especially, so you can project the characterizations of those films on a completely unrelated Wolverine in this film. His motivations are almost the exact same as they are in Logan, yet we don't have any actual textual reason to care within this movie. He's nothing more than a lifeless action figure that you project meaning onto because of the cartoons you watched as a kid or the movies you saw growing up. They could have done something interesting with this too. You know, Deadpool could have traveled to a universe with an active X-Men roster, found a Wolverine who is in the X-Men, not jaded like this one that actually wants to be part of the X-Men. And, he could just go, wow, you're not drinking your weight in whiskey. You didn't try to kill me immediately, so that's a positive. Sorry, but I'll be taking him off your hands. And then, boom, we get a couple X-Men cameos asking, who the hell is this guy? And, Deadpool nabs that Wolverine instead, takes him in his portal. You get your fun little fan service cameos, and you get a Wolverine who actually has a different set of motivations that we haven't really seen before. It's not a perfect fix, and I came up with it in 2 minutes, but it's better than just rehashing his character arc from Logan, but just shittier. Speaking of the movie Logan, I want to talk about Laura. She's stuck in the void, and she's not really there for any explainable reason. Again, things just happen in this movie because they have to happen. Since I'm talking about Laura, I guess I should address the other cameos as well. Actually, a couple of these are a bit less of cameos and more small supporting roles. Chris Evans is in it as the Human Torch for a pretty funny joke. And we've got some of the side characters from the X-Men films that are all part of Cassandra's sort of group. Yeah, Sabretooth is in it. He dies in 2 seconds. There's some other small little cameos like that. But the main supporting role cameos are Daphne Keene's Laura, Wesley Snipes' Blade, and Jennifer Garner's Elektra. Oh, and Channing Tatum's Gambit. I actually liked that one. He had some pretty funny dialogue and his action looked pretty cool, so it was cool to see him play that role that he was meant to play, a long time ago. I'm already regretting calling these supporting roles because they're all pretty much just glorified cameos except for Daphne Keene's Laura. She's given a little bit more to do, not really that much still. Wesley Snipes has a cool entrance. He said his ice skating line again, so we could go, hey, I remember that from the Blade movies. Jennifer Garner's Elektra makes a joke about her real-life divorce that actually got a chuckle out of me. That's all I really have to say about any of them. Laura, however, has one of the worst examples of the I recognize that thing phenomenon that genuinely made me roll my eyes in the theater. During the big action sequence when they're storming Cassandra's compound, she pulls a pair of sunglasses out of her backpack, and guess what? It's the same pair of sunglasses from the movie Logan! Yeah, remember that movie? I remember it. Wasn't it so cool? Gosh, Logan was great, wasn't it? Man, that movie was awesome. Was that movie about anything, I wonder? Surely it isn't about the limits of the medium of comics and the genre of superhero films and how it becomes an endless cycle that never allows anyone to age or grow or truly change after the first movie because there's too much money to be made. Nah, it couldn't be about that. Anyway, Deadpool and Wolverine rocks because it's got things I recognize in it, and that makes me point at the screen and go, whoa, I know that thing. Yeah, like, I get that the sunglasses thing is a bit of a nitpick, but I just think it perfectly distills the problems with this kind of filmmaking. It's an image with no meaning, just recognizability. That's not nearly the worst problem I have with Laura in this film, though. At the end of the movie, Deadpool and Wolverine save the universe, all is right, and Deadpool and his friends are now joined by a couple new faces, Wolverine and Laura. And it basically implies that this is their life now and this is where they'll be staying. And so Laura is just going to be living with this Wolverine now, I guess. She replaces her old, gross, stupid, dead dad that died in Logan with a nice, shiny, new action figure dad that can never die. I've rarely seen anyone talk about this, and I don't get it. So many of these MCU nerds are such sticklers for canon and continuity, but I haven't seen any of them talk about this at all. It's irritating, and I don't even care about canon that much usually. I don't have much else to say about Laura and Wolverine, so that only leaves us really with the main character, Deadpool. And, if you can guess by the rest of this review, I didn't really like him that much in this movie either. In fact, I didn't even hate him. I just didn't really feel anything about him at all. I thought the first 2 movies were pretty funny, even if some of the humor has gotten a little bit old, but I don't know if it's just because there's been 6 years since the last movie, or if I've just gotten older, or if this movie is just written worse overall, which, I mean, it is. But I laughed at a couple moments. There's a point when Deadpool makes a joke on how a big part of the plot hinges on season 1, episode 5 of Loki, which, that was pretty funny. It admittedly got a little chuckle out of me, but everything else, I don't know. I mean, I found myself laughing every now and then, but I don't think this one was nearly as funny as the other 2. And I think there's actually a big reason for that. Most of the jokes, like in most Deadpool stories, rely on a sort of meta commentary, breaking the fourth wall type of thing. That's Deadpool's whole shtick. The problem is, when you've already done it so many times, and you've portrayed this self-awareness, the self-awareness in itself isn't subversive at all if you're just going to do the same things that you criticize the other MCU movies for. Deadpool makes many jokes at the state of the MCU, how it's at a low point, how there's been soulless cash grabs, and how, boring the multiverse type stories have become because they just rehash the same thing over and over again. And then this movie is just a soulless cash grab with the boring multiverse story that has no actual emotional stakes. Just because you're self-aware about a trope doesn't mean you're actually subverting it in any way. In fact, it kind of shows a lack of confidence with the writing, I think. There's this sense of like, oh, since we're aware that this isn't really good, as long as we point it out, then you should be okay with it not being good, but you shouldn't be okay with that. There's a lot more you can do with this to be a bit more subversive, and any chance at actual subversion or interesting storytelling is just completely panned and left to the side. Nothing in this movie really surprises you, aside from the fact of, which 50-year-old actor is gonna reclaim the role that they played like 20 years ago. Also, I've seen a lot of praise for the action online, and I feel kind of bewildered by that. I feel like we've forgotten what a good action sequence looks like. I'll admit, the intro sequence is kind of fun, even if it drags out for a little bit too long. The car fight is pretty fun. I think that's done really well, and I actually really like Hugh Jackman's performance in that scene and what he says to Deadpool and that sort of scene they share. I think that scene is actually, a really nice little needle in a otherwise ginormous haystack of shit that is this movie. Any action sequences that come after that car fight just aren't interesting at all, especially when heading towards the very climax of the movie, when Deadpool and Wolverine mow down, the waves of other Deadpools. The action just feels weightless. I've seen people comparing that little oneer scene to Oldboy, and I'm just like, I feel like I'm living on a different planet than them. Oldboy's action has weight, it has purpose, not just visually but thematically, right? I'm not even saying that this action sequence has to have some deep thematic meaning or some incredible plot significance, but it shouldn't be weightless. Wolverine's a 300-pound fucking animal, and when he's stabbing guys in this action scene, it looks like he's just like poking paper with the pencil. I don't know how to explain it to you, but if you are going to watch the movie again, because I've heard a lot of people going to watch the movie another time, pay attention to the action sequences, this one especially. The choreography and CG work just really is not very good. And again, I don't blame VFX artists for this at all, because I know it is a bitch to be a VFX artist working at Disney. The crunch you work under, there's no clear vision from the director, everything is fucking compartmentalized. I know it's a bitch, so I'm not personally knocking the CG artists themselves, because I know that's incredibly difficult. But I think the Looney Tunes style weightless rubbery action works for Deadpool a little bit more, because he quite literally is a Looney Tunes character. But when you throw Wolverine into the mix, a 300-pound beast whose every move has a lot of purpose, it feels very disjointed and very weightless. And so I've seen a lot of people saying, they want to go see the movie again. So if you do watch it again, I ask you to pay attention to that action sequence in particular, and just really think about, do you feel anything? Does anything feel guttural? Does anything feel visceral? It's Wolverine. Things should feel visceral. Even in Logan, when this man is fucking dying, the action has weight to it. It has purpose. Even if he can't claw through people as mercilessly as he used to and as savagely as he used to, there's still purpose to the action. Everything here is just floating and weightless and just a blurb, an uninteresting blurb to look at. Look, by now I've probably rambled on too long, but I genuinely feel like there's some mass psychosis or something, that I didn't watch the same movie as these people. Anytime I've seen anyone criticize this movie online at all, the amount of hate and shit that's spewed their way, and just the classic defense of, you hate fun movies, oh, it's not supposed to be good, it's just supposed to be fun. It's like, action cinema and blockbuster cinema can be a lot fucking better than this. And I think you're setting your standards too low if this is really satiating you in any sort of way. It really does nothing for me, unfortunately, which sucks, because I did like those first two movies. I like a lot of the X-Men movies, the big mess that whole universe is. I like a lot of that stuff. I want you to know that this video wasn't coming from a place of wanting to hate this movie at all. That I was pretty severely let down, even with not super high expectations. I think you should want more and have a higher standard for yourself, because they're just going to keep spewing out stuff like this, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse, and the returns are going to be diminishing and diminishing and diminishing. If you do go see this movie again, try to take the lenses of nostalgia off for a second. The preconceived notions about the character Wolverine that you grew up with, try to take those away, because that's not who this character is in this movie. I said earlier in this video that a lot of the characters in this film are just meaningless action figures meant just to be thrown on screen so that the audience can point and recognize them. But I realized I was wrong. They're even less than action figures. Because when I was a kid, when I'd take one of my action figures, and when my storyline that I was creating called for one of them to die, that shit would affect me a lot more than this movie did.
Joey, there's no living with a killing. There's no going back from one. Right and wrong, it's a brand. A brand sticks. Now you run on home to your mother and tell her everything's all right. There aren't any more guns in the valley.